Hold on. Send it to your MAR account again. Or should I send it to your MAR account and others?
Send it to the MAR and the L. Because one of them will get through it. Yeah.
You don't want it to Lisa E. Personal. Sent it again. Come in. Major Velez, nice to hear and see you. You get the prize for being the first in my seminar. Colonel Judy, thank you for getting me in. I think you're on mute. You might be on mute.
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you for doing the presentation for us.
Fantastic. Okay. So I have Lieutenant Colonel Egri in as well. And I think right now it's just us and Major Velez. I guess he wanted to get a good seat in my seminar. He wanted to be in there first.
Yeah, that's it.
You know, it's just turnaround. I always tried to get a good seat at encampment for his when he was talking. So I guess it's turnabout is fair play.
There you go.
Glad that you're on. Thank you so much, Major.
All right, Gene, if you're good, I'm going to pop back out and make sure nobody else needs any help.
No problem at all. Did I do something wrong with not being able to start this, or is it just that I need?
I think it's just the the time frame that Teams has.
Okay.
So we set these to auto start. So.
Got it. Thank you.
If you're talking, Gene, you're on mute.
I was talking and I knew I was on mute, but that was to my moderator, who's a couple feet to my right, and that's Lieutenant Colonel Egri. But thank you. You guys all have my back. I appreciate it. Hello, Janine.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Okay. I am going to go back and just have my slide being displayed. Can you see that, Janine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Got it. I will stay here with the camera on and off mute. as people join. What do you see now on the screen? My the Teams people? Okay, I'll leave that there for a while. That way at least I can see who's coming in. I hope everyone is doing well today. And that you enjoyed the first few minutes of the Wing Conference, the quick awards and the introductory speakers and Colonel Moody. Thought it was really well done. I'm going to turn off the camera for a few minutes, folks. Get myself off mute and get my camera on. So I would like to start right on time. Which will be in about a minute, folks. And since it just turned 10:45, I'll give it until it turns 10:46 and we're going to get started. Welcome those who have already joined. This is Colonel Egri, and the presentation is on project management. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But if this is the seminar that you wanted to be in, you're in the right one. Good morning, everyone. This is Colonel Gene Egri. I am the Vice Commander for Mid-Atlantic Region. And today we're going to be talking about the application of project management in Civil Air Patrol. I will be presenting. I have Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Egri as my moderator. She is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions during the presentation, or there are certain spots where I'm going to stop and ask for a little participation from you all. And the chat is where you would want to be. Type it in there. If for some reason that's not working for you and we get to a point, you can take yourself off mute. Otherwise, please keep yourself on mute for the entire presentation. And you don't need to turn your camera on. And I will get started. And she's going to monitor who's here as well. She'll look at the participants. So once again, I want to thank Colonel Moody for the opportunity to teach this seminar. Really do appreciate it. I've been a member since 1979. I joined as a cadet. Served as a Delaware Wing Commander from 2008 to 2011. That's where I got the Eagles. I also served as Middle East region, what it was called back there, the Chief of Staff from 2014 to 2018. And I'm currently serving as the Mid-Atlantic region Vice Commander. We used to have two, now we're down to one, and it's me. Professionally, and this is where it's germane to this particular presentation. I'm a certified project manager from the Project Management Institute, PMI, and the Project Management Professional, which is the certification, is a PMP. And I've been a PMP since 2003. So hopefully I'm going to try to stay away from a lot of acronyms, but sometimes it's important that you do hear them. So right now, PMI, PMP. I am an IT manager at Geico. I've been there for 17 years. If you really want to see more about me, you can go to the Mid-Atlantic Region webpage, and it has a bio, a full bio of me on that. And that's my contact email, which I will display again at the end of the presentation. All right, the purpose to the seminar. I want to make sure everybody understands, and by the time we end, hopefully you'll get an appreciation for it, that a lot of the project management principles that we're going to talk about are life skills as well, and can be applied in business. So that's the plus. It's not a Civil Air Patrol skill only. It's applicable to your life, and you can use it in business. I do every day. It's applicable to both cadets and senior. That's important. This is not a senior thing, cadets and seniors, and hopefully the cadets are applying it as well for some of the examples we're going to give later. It's important for us to apply these skills because it does help ensure excellence in everything we do, which is one of our core values. We need to do that for that excellence because delivering our missions safely to our members and positive outcomes for our customers is paramount. I'd like to inspire through the end of this seminar to have some folks potentially consider a career in project management. There is actually a lot of jobs out there for project managers, especially if you go through and getting the certification for PMP, which is required a lot of times for many of those jobs, especially in the government. There's a lot of opportunities out there for project managers. So if you're a cadet on this seminar and you're considering what am I going to do when I get out of college, etc., seriously consider becoming a project manager. It's important, and actually, when you become a PMP, you take an oath. And part of that oath, and I'm paraphrasing here, is to further the profession of project management. So this is one example where, as a PMP, I'm furthering the profession because hopefully I'm going to inspire some folks to be project managers. Our objectives then. First and foremost, this is not a seminar where I'm going to teach you project management. Are you going to hear about project management skills, about what project management is? Absolutely. But it is not an end-to-end, fully baked, fully a objective of teaching you all there is to know about project management. That's not what we're going to do. I'm going to define basic project management terminology. And a lot of you have probably heard a lot of these before. And I'm going to showcase some examples of how we apply project management principles and the discipline in CAP. And once we get to that point, you're going to say, well, yeah, of course, you know. So why is it important to use project management? And this is an example that I was taught way, way back in the day. And they said, consider this. If you're going to build a house, you can approach it two different ways. The first way is if I tell you go out and build a house, approach number one, you grab a hammer, some nails, and some lumber, and you start putting together a house. Think about that for a moment. Is that really the best way to approach it? Are there problems that can occur if you just jump into it without a fully baked plan? Of course there is. Approach number two is we plan to build that house. We'll get a blueprint of what we want to build. From that, we'll figure out what resources we need, and then we'll approach it. Because you don't want to have your walls up and drywalled, and then the electricians come in and say, well, how am I going to put the wires in the wall? You've already covered it up. So that's just a simple example to highlight which approach is better. So project management and applying a plan is always the best way to go, especially on major projects. So what is a project? PMI, as I mentioned before, they define it as the use of specific knowledge, skills, tools, techniques to deliver something of value to people. So there's always an objective. There's something that you're trying to deliver. And we add that word value because we don't like to do things that really don't count. So if we're going to make sure that we have a good project plan, we're going to make sure it's going to be of value to someone, our customer. It's unique, it's temporary, and it's undertaken to achieve the plan, a purpose, an objective. That's important. Sometimes you will hear the word program. A project, by definition, has a beginning and an end, and we define and deliver something. So that's why it's considered a temporary endeavor and unique. Life can be viewed as a series of projects. All right. You can apply a lot of these tools and techniques with equal effectiveness for anything that you are trying to do. And we'll talk about events later. You can apply that, as I was thinking about that, to you're about to get married and you're planning your wedding. Of course, you're going to apply some project management skills. Crazy if you don't. So some definitions. Scope. What is scope? Scope is the extent or the subject matter that you're dealing with. You have to know what you're trying to accomplish, what your goal is. And you got to put some guardrails around that. That's scope. If you don't have guardrails and scope keeps getting bigger when you start a project, the planning that you've done, it's like trying to build a skyscraper or a house on a foundation of quicksand. All right, it's always changing. And you might hear the word scope creep, and that specifically has to deal with you define the scope, and as the project progresses, people keep throwing stuff in. That's what's called scope creep. Cost. Everything you do with a project is going to have some cost to it. It can be direct costs like money, or indirect costs like people. It's going to be, how am I going to get this done? Which folks do I need? Do I have to, if I'm planning a wing conference or something like that, do I got to pay for the venue, pay the hotel, etc.? Time. Remember I said projects are unique and they're temporary in nature. So therefore, they have a due date. So because it has a due date, you have to actively manage projects. So time management, your schedule, and how you're doing on that schedule during the course of a project to make sure that you accomplish the project when you promise to deliver it is very important. And then quality. It's important based on the definitions of what, or the objectives of what you want to deliver, that what is the customer, or what we call, you'll hear this term a lot, stakeholder. They have a vested interest in your project. What do they need in terms of the project deliverables? You can say, I understand the customer wants this delivered, but did you really deliver what they were asking for? Make sure you understand the objectives, and in order to satisfy, and here's another important term, requirements, you've got to know what they want. Don't assume anything. Make sure those requirements of what you're supposed to deliver are very clear, defined, written out. All right? And that'll start you. Those definitions by themselves may not mean a lot if you think about it until you get to a very important project principle, which is called the triple constraint. Now, remember those 4 definitions I just told you. They were scope, time, cost, and quality. Triple constraint is represented as a triangle, an equilateral triangle. All of those items must balance in order for you to accomplish the project. Why is quality in the middle? Because if you stay within your scope and your cost and get it done on time, but you deliver a product that doesn't meet the requirements and or doesn't work, then quality is affected. So it really does mean everything to have that balance of the triple constraint and make sure that you deliver quality. That's the centerpiece. Some other terms you may hear. WBS, which stands for work breakdown structure, versus a project plan. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the term project plan before. Maybe you haven't heard about WBS, and I'll explain that in a moment here. But when we go through this, you're going to understand that a project plan isn't, we just got to do these things. There's a lot more to it. So the project plan is your implementation tool of that triple constraint. So that work breakdown structure, let's talk about that first, because it is something that you do first. A work breakdown structure, here's the definition. It's a method for completing complex multi-step projects. And simply, you want to break down the project into small chunks, tasks. Some of them can be done at the same time. Some of them have to be done in order. But at this point, you just want to make sure that you have a list of all of those tasks. All right. It's very, very important that you gather all the things that you need to do. Remember, I talked about building a house? A work breakdown structure for building a house is listing all the things you have to do. Well, I've got to get electric in. I've got to get plumbing, the drywallers, the framers, the roofers. Okay, well, all those things are tasks. But if we don't do a little bit more to that, what comes first? Who's going to do it? Well, then we're not going to accomplish the project. And that's where we start getting into what is needed as far as a project plan. So a work breakdown structure is kind of the start of the process. Tasks, durations, there's no dates, no resources yet, just the tasks. Project plan, I've alluded to it already. That's the formal approved document. If you're building a house and you're the customer, you want to make sure that you have a blueprint and the folks that are going to build that house for you, that they agree to that project plan, because you're going to be paying for that house probably over 30 years of your life. So it's real important that you know and ensure that the folks that are doing the work for you deliver what you want, because you're going to have to live with it for the, those 30 years, unless you sell your house early. It has those tasks that we have from the work breakdown structure. It puts dates on them, dependencies and resources. So resources, that's easy. Who's going to do it? What material do we need? Drywallers, as a resource, need drywall to do the job. So those are two types of resources. Dependencies. We talked about that a little bit ago. You don't want your drywallers to put up drywall if there is no frame for them to put it up. So you want to make sure that the frame is there first, but you don't want to let them do that, because we got to get plumbing and or electrical in there first. So drywalling is dependent upon the electrical wire in the wall being finished, the frame being there, the plumbing being finished, etc. Hopefully you're starting to get an appreciation for how this kind of progresses over time. And a project plan contains all that. And you can say, well, this seems like, common knowledge. You'd be surprised how many times people try to use that first approach. They'll take the hammer and the nail and the lumber and they'll try to start building a house, and they won't do the project plan. So that's where it's very, very important. Talked about that. So we're going to get to the interactive part right now. Here's where we're going to take a poll, if you will. We'll ask you to give your answers to this in the chat, please. And then Lieutenant Colonel Egri is going to read me back what folks have typed in. Here's the first question, or excuse me. We're going to talk about project manager skills. Chat for your responses. What is the #1 most important skill for project management? What is the #1 most important skill for project management? Take a moment and type that in the chat. Now I'm just going to give you guys a few minutes here, and Colonel Egri is going to start monitoring. We getting people typing things in? Okay, fantastic. And when I do the reveal of what it is, there's going to be a quick follow-up question to it. You'll need to type that in as well. But some of this, some people may be surprised by what the most important skill is. Some people may not be surprised. Okay, so have we had enough folks answer? Take a moment, type it in your chat. We just want to give everybody a few moments to type it in. All right. Did we have anybody guess it?
We have time management.
Have you had anybody guess it? Okay, I'm going to do the reveal because I need to move on here as she tallies it up. So the number one most important skill is communication. Take a moment. Let that kind of sink in. Everything we've been talking about so far, the examples, etc., isn't communication a key part of that? Here's the second part of the question. Now that you know it's the most important skill, what percentage of time does that skill of communication represent for a project manager? How much time, percentage-wise, out of 100%, does a project manager spend on communication? You can give me an exact percentage, you can give me a range,
100%.
but I just want to make sure that folks, now, you want to make sure that if a project manager they have a lot of things to do, right? They got to do the project plan. They got a lot of things to work with. So there are other things they have to do other than communications.
80%.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like we've got some folks that have been typing in some pretty good answers here. So here's the reveal. A project manager spends between 75% and 90% of their time communicating. And that number, by the way, is not something that Gene Egri made up. I got that from the Project Management Institute. That's their research. That's PMI's research. And it's a question that they ask our PMPs all the time. But it is obviously extremely important. You've got to make sure you're communicating with your resources. You've got to make sure you're communicating with your customers, because building a house takes a lot of time. If it's your house that they're building, wouldn't you want to know on a weekly basis or even a daily basis, how are things progressing? When's it going to be done? So that project manager is going to make sure that they're spending time with stakeholder communications, customer communications, to get the job done. So hopefully that made some sense. And we just talked about why. So we must make sure that we communicate clear instructions, set expectations, manage stakeholders. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you're a project manager and you've got a customer that is a little difficult to work with, that wants constant updates, or maybe one that's totally hands off and maybe doesn't want to hear from you, you may want to consider how you're going to manage that, because the person who wants an update every 5 minutes, that's unrealistic. You need to manage to that. Set a reasonable update schedule for project updates. All right. So very, very important. And of course, we need to communicate changes. If there's any changes that are needed, we always set requirements. We talked about requirements being part of scope, and scope can try to be increased. That's scope creep. Sometimes, as you're working through a project, you find that maybe something was missed in the requirements, or the customer changed their mind. I went through this when I built a house. Initially we had our house defined with a certain number of windows, and in the living room, one wall didn't have any windows. We didn't think we wanted it. But as the house was being built, we rethought that and said, I think we should put 2 windows here. That's change management. We had to go back to the contractor and say, change the plans. Can you get a window in here? And they had to come back to us and say, yeah, we can do it. It's going to cost this much more money, etc. So what are some skills that are needed in project management? Some skills needed in project management. This is not something you have to type in the chat. If you want to, that's fine. But I just want you to think about it for a moment. Some of those other skills. Obviously, we talked about communication being the number one. But what other things? Give yourself just a moment. You want to type some things in? That's perfectly fine. And Colonel Agri will whisper those in my ear here. And then I'm going to go through them. Just a list. We get some folks typing in. Talked about communication being the number one, so obviously I listed that first. So what about these? Leadership, scheduling, risk management. Oh my Lord, where did that one come from? Do you mean that we talk about risk in project management? We talk about safety with project management? You betcha. Even with building a house, we have to make sure that the folks that are building it are safe. We have to list all of the risks. If there's a really bad weather, or perhaps you're building your house in the wintertime, there's certain kinds of risks that may avail themselves if you're building your house in the middle of winter. Well, there's no roof on that house yet. You're framing it and everything, and we have a big bad snowstorm. Guess what you have inside the house that didn't have a roof? Lots of snow. And now you have to deal with that. Got to consider those risks. Cost management, especially if you're the one that's paying the bill. You don't want to give that project manager a blank check. You want to manage the cost. You want to know how much it's going to cost ahead of time. You're going to have a budget. Negotiating is, if you are the project manager and you're trying to get things done, is it important that you negotiate, that you have the right amount of money, budget to pay for the cost of the resources? Plus, especially if this is business, I want to make sure that I make a profit. I want to make sure that if I have, if it's a corporation, that, you know, we can take that money as a profit and give it to our you know, stockholders, etc. So that's important. You got to have good negotiating skills. Critical thinking, extremely important. Where do you think that work breakdown structure, the tasks, who are you going to go to resource who the plumber's going to be, who the person who does the drywall, the electrical. And during this, and those of you, I know there's a few folks that have a military experience. There's an old saying, you know, no plan survives the first day or first hour of battle. Does that mean you shouldn't plan? Of course not. However, you're going to be able to think on your feet, because stuff happens. Stuff happens. Good critical thinking. Task management. Just because you put the plan out there and say, here's the tasks, somebody has to stay on top of those tasks, making sure that people are doing the work, that, you know, you didn't tell them that it's taking, you know, 4 days, and every time you show up at the job site, they're on break. You got to make sure that the tasks are being actively managed and tracked. Quality management. We talked about quality, hopefully enough now that you got an appreciation for what that means. We have to deliver what we said we would deliver to our customers. Anything else below that is a quality issue. And here's something I'll just throw in. A lot of times people will, when they're thinking of a project or a task, they'll say, this is what was required. This is what the customer said I had to do, and this is what I'm going to deliver. However, wouldn't it be nice if I surprised them and I gave them a little bit more? It's not going to take that much longer. It won't cost that much more, but I'm just going to throw that in. Folks, there's a term for that in project management. It's called gold plating. It is not what you want to do. It's your job to meet the customer's expectations in terms of delivery. If you're constantly thinking, I'm going to give them more and exceed it, it may not be what they wanted. And when I was learning project management, I'm probably going to, you know, date myself here with some of the cars that I'm going to say, but if I'm going in there and I want a Ford Pinto or some car like that. And during the course of the project, they deliver a Cadillac to me. Pretty big difference. A lot more gold plating to go from a Ford Pinto or to a Cadillac. Okay, so gold plating is just another one I threw in there for you. And I think it is important. I put this in here to have a sense of humor. You want to make sure that you're dealing with folks. Project management is a relationship skill. You've got to make sure that you have a good sense of humor. You don't take yourself too seriously, because you want people to want to work with you. So hopefully those skills have helped out. What are some of the projects in CAP? I'm going to watch my time here. I think we're doing pretty well. Let me see. I'd like you to type in the chat. This is another interactive option. Type in the chat what you believe can be considered a project in CAP. What kinds of things do you think can be a project in CAP? And you have a list of who's on, right? Okay, great. Thank you. So type that in. You don't have to tell me yet. I just want to take a moment. And I'm going to go through them here, but I just want to give you a moment. And Colonel Eggery off camera here is kind of whispering of them to me as they're coming in. And yes, a lot of you are definitely nailing a lot of projects that we do and we can apply project management to in Civil Air Patrol. Okay. All right, let me go forward here. Again, watching my time. Most of what we do in Civil Air Patrol can be considered a project. Yes, most of what we do in Civil Air Patrol can be considered a project. Don't take approach number one and approach something in Civil Air Patrol. If you're given an assignment, take that hammer, those nails, and the board and try to start building a house. No, you want to make sure that you apply a very detailed project plan and discipline to getting the job done, whatever it may be. Squadron meetings, and these are rhetorical questions, folks, by the way. Squadron meetings are a project. Do they require planning? Do they require resourcing? Do we need to look beyond one meeting when we're planning out what we're going to be doing? So the meeting themselves could be a project, but if you stick them all together, that could be the program of different projects, which are every single meeting. We don't do the same thing in every meeting. Sometimes we may focus on physical fitness, PT, another time on CDI. We want to make sure that somehow in every meeting we talk about safety, things like that. Activities, encampments. Now, Colonel Eggery told me a lot of you typed in encampments. And when we get to that slide, I probably should turn it over to Major Velez. I know he's on here, and he'll probably be able to jump in and say if I missed anything. But encampments, obviously, it's a big deal. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of planning that has to go into it. You cannot take your hammer, nails, and lumber and start approaching building an encampment. Never going to work. A wing conference. You're at a wing conference today. It's virtual. Do you think there was some planning, project management involved with executing this wing conference? Behind the scenes, there's project management in play right now as we speak. I'm a resource. I'm presenting a seminar. I'm doing it with teams. You all are my stakeholders. And of course, missions. She told me that a lot of folks were typing in missions, but don't just think actual missions, training missions as well, right? You got to train the way you're going to fight. That's another military term. It is important that you are prepared to accomplish our missions. So be it a disaster relief mission, an ELT, a missing person search, each one of those is a different type of mission. Yeah, there are some transferable skills across them. However, each one has some unique things that you would have to train for. So missions themselves. And I've got a slide, folks, on each one of these that go in a little bit more detail. At a high level, those are the ones I want to talk about for the rest of my seminar here. Okay? And I think we're doing really well on time. And I'm not going to just float these objectives in one at a time, because I really wanted to show you the whole slide and have you take a few minutes to kind of digest it, because what I have written here is by no means exhaustive. So take a moment, look at what's on the screen, and if you have something that I didn't type here that you think would be good for me to share with the other folks that are attending this seminar, by all means, type it in. Lieutenant Colonel Egri will tell me, and I will make sure that I mention that as well. But for squadron meetings, of course, you got to have an objective. For us, there are some requirements that are defined in the regulations, things we have to do at squadron meetings, especially for cadets. We have a list of tasks, classes, things that we want to do. And you should have a project plan for each meeting. There should be a schedule and agenda, and people should know about that before the meeting occurs. Again, approach number 2, before the meeting occurs, you got a plan. Approach number 1, you all show up and say, what are we going to do tonight? Let's figure it out. Well, can you teach a class? Well, yeah, I can talk about anything. No, you're really doing your members a disservice if you're kind of approaching this off the cuff. That's important. So build that project plan. Make sure you have your resources aligned and that they know what they're doing. I volunteered to teach this seminar. I had to sell it to Colonel Moody and say, you know, here's something that I think would be applicable to the members that they would be able to use. And I had to sell that, and she, number 1, had to approve it. And once she did, then it was my job to go out and build this presentation, do the research. Trust me when I say, this is not something that I did in an hour. Okay, this took me many days, hours, and I kept going through, refining it, making sure it's going to meet the time frame for completing this seminar, which is 11:45. So that's important. All of that was on me. The budget and the cost was pretty darn reasonable. I'm not getting paid for this, and there were no costs in me going out there and using PowerPoint to build this presentation. But from a resource standpoint, yeah, there was a cost because that was me. And a lot of other people who helped me. Lieutenant Colonel Egri, I had a lot of folks review this and give me some feedback and some suggestions. Well, the same thing should happen, and I'm tying this all back to what's on the screen right now, back to a squadron meeting. So just because you have a plan doesn't mean you post it and say, okay, everybody go do it. If I'm the squadron commander, and I'd go around. I'd pop my head into the classes that are being held. I want to make sure that meeting is progressing as planned, that there's value in what they're doing, and they're doing it safely. So safety is always going to be a recurring thing. And here's the last part that you'll see on multiple slides here. For squadron meetings, and I'm going back to some of my experience, you don't want to necessarily have a full-blown hot wash at the end of every meeting, but you may want to look at the body of what occurred during a certain period of time, maybe quarterly, maybe annually, and sit down and really look at how you did. It's called a lessons learned session. And if you think project management as a circular or a cycle, you're starting off with your planning and executing whatever. at the end, there's lessons learned because those get to be applied to the next time that you do it. So you're constantly monitoring, getting better, changing, because you might have an outstanding program that you are implementing and executing flawlessly. But guess what? Something changed. Maybe a regulation changed. You've got to make sure that you change to keep up with the time, to be current, to be relevant. So did we get any others that were typed in that might want to share here, Colonel Agri? Nope. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next one. So let's talk about a very large activity like encampment. So like I said, I know from when we started the seminar here that I've got the West Virginia Wing Encampment Commander, Major Velez. He's been working this for many, many years. So I'll just go through this. Again, take a look at what's on that slide. Digest that for a moment. And type in the chat if you think that anything was missed as I kind of talk through this. So encampment, very, very important. In order for an encampment to be accredited, there are certain things by regulation that must happen, that must occur. If you don't, then your encampment's not going to count. And that's a bad thing. And what about those folks that go to encampment, a cadet, and for whatever reason, and I'm exaggerating here, and the cadet goes to encampment and says, you know, I looked at what the West Virginia Wing Encampment agenda is. I looked at the schedule for all the days, and I'm going to choose to not go to this class. I'm going to sleep in on this day, and I'm just going to do whatever I want. Does that mean that that cadet at the end of the encampment period, that they're going to graduate? That they've accomplished all that was required by regulation? Of course not. Now, would that ever be allowed to happen? Of course not. All right. The staff, the encampment commander, is going to be all over that. We want to make sure that we are accomplishing our objective. And we want to make sure that our customer, which is ultimately the cadets, have a great experience and that they get what they need. So they get that credit, so they can get their Mitchell, etc. How does that start? I told you all that project management is cyclical. And I heard, I've been to several West Virginia Wing encampments, and graduation last year, Major Velez was talking to his staff, and he said, you know, hey, you know, we've got graduation now. We're going to get this all done. And guess what he started talking about? He started talking about planning for the next encampment right away. No breaks. We're going to apply lessons learned. They're going to have meetings, and they go right into the cycle of planning again for the next encampment. That's exactly the right thing to do, folks. All right. You can see on here some of the other things. Got to make sure you're going to know where the encampment's going to be, the dates, contracts if you got to sign them. That adds a little bit of complexity because you as a member, as a particular commander, cannot sign anything. All right. Anything that requires a signature has to go to national headquarters, up through the chain of command. You want to make sure that you got your wing commander assigning your wing legal officer to take a look. They'll coordinate with the region legal officer, and they'll get that down to national headquarters. And our COO, John Salvador, is typically the signature that's on that. It may require general counsel review. That's Mr. Rafael Robles, if you've ever heard that name. But anything that has to do with contracts, you know, I'm just telling everybody this. Don't sign anything. There is nothing that you should be signing. All right. Always, always, always kick it up the chain of command. All right. Don't make that mistake. Get in a lot of trouble for that. Of course, from a resource standpoint, and this is again, a Colonel Egri thing. When I was a wing commander, and I do this at region, not for encampment because we don't have a region encampment, but region activities. What you need to do is you need to select a commander. I make sure that we select the senior commander and the cadet commander, and that's really the extent of my involvement with resources, because you want to pick the right person, the right leader at the top, and then let them take a step back and let them do their job. They're going to choose their staff. They know what they need. They know what to do, right? So you're involved with those two selections, and then step back, let them do their job. There's definitely budgeting costs. A lot of times, well, most of the time, we charge our cadets some amount of money to go to encampment. We want to keep that cost as low as possible because parents, it's a lot of burden financially. The wing typically will subsidize and pay for certain things. We might get donations, depending on where we're holding encampments. The National Guard will kick in different resources at no cost. There are a lot of things that come into that, but it's important to manage that, because if you didn't and you just said, well, we're just going to charge the cadets. Well, there's a big difference between asking a cadet for a week activity, 1 week activity to pay $50 versus there's no subsidies and now you got to ask them to pay $300. How many cadets and families and parents can afford that? Not many. You're going to have VIPs. I told you all, I was at the West Virginia encampment for several years. I was at this year's. You're going to have folks showing up for various reasons. They're either there to visit for oversight. The Air Force will pop in. Command will pop in. Things like that. There's regulatory requirements at the region level where we have to visit our wing encampments. But either way, you want to make sure that you plan for that and that you have the right people shepherding those folks around. You don't want, let's say, the region commander showing up and there's nobody there to greet them, walk them around or anything, and just say, okay, sir, you can do whatever you want. Drop into any class you want, and let me know if you need anything. No, you want to make sure that you shepherd them through that staff visit. Awards, extremely important. Nothing is better for esprit de corps. And I've seen a lot of, especially in encampment, I am always so impressed with some of the creative, innovative awards that are presented at encampments. And each wing does it a little bit differently, but it's all about that uniqueness and feeling special. We're not going to sit here and think, well, we're going to give nothing but commanders commendations and, meritorious service awards. If you're thinking that, you're missing the boat. Be innovative. All right. When I was a cadet in Pennsylvania Wing, we have every year, and I think it's still going on, they call it Ranger Team Competition. And there was an award created for innovation because there was an exercise going on, one of the tasks or tests that we were doing, and they were trying to strap a person into a Stokes litter, and they needed to cover them, and the covering wasn't being held together correctly, and it was a poncho, and they didn't want to ruin the poncho and poke holes in it or anything. And a cadet reached into their gear and they pulled out a clothespin, which you hang on a clothesline, things like that. I know I'm showing my age again, but a clothespin, and he just took a couple clothespins and they closed that poncho on top of the patient in the Stokes litter. They created an award. It was very cool. They took a clothespin and they sprayed it with gold paint and they called it the Golden Clothespin Award for innovation. That's what I'm talking about. And there are many, many, many great examples that I've seen at a lot of encampments. All right. Of course, on a daily basis, you're managing the encampment. Are things being done safely? Are we on schedule? Are people fed? Everybody feeling good, etc. And then, as I mentioned, after action reviews, AARs, they're called, if you hear that term, but it's really a lessons learned session. And the purpose of that is to look for opportunities to improve, things we should change. And that goes right into that cycle of planning again, circle for the next encampment. Any things that were typed in that we should bring up? Colonel Leggery?
The two that were there was the meals, and somebody said even the award was innovative.
Yep. And I don't know if Major Velez is on here, and I'm trying to remember one from West Virginia. I know you had a couple special ones. There's always something like, most improved cadet and things like that. So I'll let Major Velez type in if I may have missed one, because I want to give credit where credit is due, because there were some really cool awards for encampment. All right.
Well, I am here. I do apologize. Driving down the road, so I had to pull over. But we do have the Colonel D. Barron Award, which is the most improved cadet, and that one is kind of voted in by all the senior members. So we've kind of made it in honor of Colonel Barron, but it is something that we kind of review on the cadets. And then we have our daily Cadet of the Day awards, and they have to be a justified award. It's not something that and those are picked by the cadet staff, and they actually have to submit their votes to me, and then I have the ultimate say, because we don't want to have a cadet get award just because he gave somebody his extra orange that he had on his plate. He has to be something that made that cadet the cadet of the day, but that's for each one of the flights. So we'll even have several of them.
Fantastic. And two important points, and then I'll move on to the next slide. And thank you, Major Velez. One is, you heard the Colonel Dennis Barron Award Most Improved Cadet. It ties to a tradition. And for those of you who know Colonel Barron, obviously there's some deep-rooted background there, because he was such an advocate for the cadet programs and a dear friend. When you tie it to something like that, it means a lot. It means something. All right. Coming up with something that is incremental, right? Most improved cadet of the day, things like that. All right. It's inspirational. You can use those awards to your advantage for motivation and esprit de corps. So, Major Velez, thank you for jumping in on that. Really appreciate it. All right. Let's talk about events like a wing conference. And I'm watching my time here, so I'm going to pick up the pace. We're doing well on time. Did you all know that there is a CAP pamphlet called an event planner guide? I'll show you. Colonel Leggery is going to copy these links into chat at the end of the seminar. But CAP pamphlet 4, and I'm going to be honest and transparent here, I didn't know it existed. Why? Because when I was a wing commander years ago, we always knew we had experienced people, a conference planning committee. We knew what to do, we thought. But, we were relying on some notes, what's in people's heads. CAP pamphlet 4 is 71 pages long. Let that noodle for a moment. 71 pages long. And it has everything in it. It talks about virtual conferences. And I don't remember all the folks that were involved, but one of them is our own Mid-Atlantic Region Maryland Wing, Lieutenant Colonel Brenda Reed. And I know from working with her, she has an incredible amount of experience planning and executing wing conferences, and that institutional knowledge was actually incorporated into that event planner guide. Remember I said project management's a life skill? If I was getting married, I'd take CAP pamphlet 4 and use it to help plan my wedding. Take a look at it, and I defy you to come back and say, there's things in there. Yeah, if I'm planning a wedding for myself or a friend, boy, oh boy, this is a great pamphlet to use. All right. Obviously, you want to pick a conference theme, have your objectives, the date, the venue, negotiating contracts, VIPs. This morning, it was important that we not only heard from the wing commander, but the Mid-Atlantic Region Commander, the Mid-Atlantic Liaison Region Commander. Those folks were part of this conference. That took prior coordination. And it's important that they are part of it. Of course, their staff. Remember when I said in encampment, the first thing you do is you pick your commander and then let them go? Well, what we always did, and I know Colonel Moody does this, they put together a conference committee. Give them the objectives, tell them what they need to do, and then let them go. All right? Awards, we already talked about that. Of course, during the course of the conference, we have to make sure things are going okay. If I couldn't get into this session, which I couldn't, I had to have Lieutenant Colonel Judy go and start it up for me, and boom, I was in, so I was able to start on time. All right, that's conference management, and of course, safety. I am 100% sure that when the conference is done, there'll be an after-action review and a lessons learned session, and Colonel Moody will talk about the next conference and who she's going to have on the committee, and they're going to start that planning cycle right away. Missions, very important. I already said this. You want to train the way you fight. Project management is important, but if we're talking about project management on a mission, there is always a sense of urgency. Then that time management skill we were talking about before is extremely important. Why? It's obvious, because we want to save lives and aid the injured. Save lives and aid the injured. That's what we're about. Safety on a mission. You want to make sure that your folks are safe and they practice safely so that when they execute the mission, we not only have the objective, or we only have the objective to fulfill, and that somebody doesn't get hurt and now one mission turned into two because we got to, rescue them. The incident command system, which is expandable and contractible, that's key when it comes to planning. There's actually a planning section chief. When it comes to resourcing, to making sure that there are objectives, all of that is something that we do with missions, be it training or actual. Communication. Well, one of the things that I do when I'm an incident commander, you're not getting off base. Okay, you're not leaving base unless I have communications with you. So if you're a ground team and I'm tasking you, you're doing a comm check in the parking lot, and if I can't hear you, you ain't going. Same thing with pilots, air crew, etc. That's extremely important. It becomes a safety issue. And then here's something that I threw in there. It's important, and the same thing happens. I didn't put it in under encampments or things like that, but there's documentation that is required, especially on a mission. You've got to fill out those ICS forms. You got to upload things in WIMMers because missions cost money. We want reimbursement for fuel. If somebody paid out of their own pocket to fill the gas up in a van, they should be reimbursed. And that's part of the mission, but it requires documentation. If you try to ask for money and you don't have a receipt, guess what? Air Force is not going to pay you. And then at the end of the mission, there should always be a debriefing and a lessons learned. Never end a mission without having a debrief with your people. Don't let them leave without having a debrief. All right. Here is the resources that Colonel Egri is going to copy into the chat. These links right here, Project Management Institute, PMI.org, has everything about project management there. It is an organization. They do charge a fee if you want to become a member. Anyone can become a member. Anyone can become a member. It's a little pricey. I renewed, and I think it's, how much did I pay this year? I want to say maybe $140 or $150, something around there. I mentioned PMP, that professional project management professional certification. That link right there takes you right to the PMI page that tells you what a PMP is. I went into it briefly, so no surprises there, but it gets obviously a lot deeper into it. And then that CAP pamphlet 4, event planner guide. Oh my Lord, what a gem! 71 pages. All right, it is 11:44, and I kind of hit my target here. If anyone has any questions, please type them into the chat, or you are free to email me at eagri@cap.gov. Thank you for taking time today and attending my seminar. I really appreciate the interaction with folks coming back to me in the chat. Major Velez taking yourself off mute there so you could safely talk to me while you were in the vehicle. So I appreciate that. But thank you. I hope that this session is inspired you, possibly, to take into consideration maybe joining the project management profession. But more importantly, that you have some good key takeaways here that you can apply in Civil Air Patrol to not only some of those examples that I talked about, but to others that we didn't even think about. I think one person talked about planning for a compliance inspection, a CI. That's it. You nailed it right there. That's the kind of stuff you ought to be thinking about. Thank you all. Have yourself a great day. And as I said, if you need anything, shoot me an email. But it was my honor and privilege to present to you all today. Thank you very much and have a great day. I'm going to stop presenting. Yep, and I know I'm still on camera. I'm waiting to see. I'm seeing people drop here. Fantastic. All right. I am going to, we're down to just one person, and I'm going to leave the session. Thanks, everybody.